Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thanks, Saurav. Thanks, Asim, for joining in. So let's get started. So, like our last two topics, we have also brought in some very interesting topic today, which is Agility 3.0, because we are trying to bring in some of the interesting topics around artificial intelligence, because that is a kind of disruption in the market at this point. And we would like to hear from some of our specialists, some of our industry experts, that whether it is really impacting us heavily, or it is still a kind of disruption, and what is the future. And we are only talking about the software industry, but how is it going to impact the other industries as well? So today we are going to talk about, because Agile has been there for the, if I consider the software delivery life cycle or software development. Now, Agile is not a buzzword anymore, right? Agile has been there for the last 25 years, and it has been going strong. Now, it has also undergone, right, lot of transformation, right? Because Agile has been brought in for the transformation, and it has also undergone lot of transformation. So when we thought about, right, agility around, let's say, 2001, when Agile Manifesto was published, that point in time, Agile was mostly meant to, right, move from waterfall to Agile, where we were bringing the requirement and then doing the design, and then, right, the development, then testing, and then the deployment, right? And it was taking huge long cycle. But when Agile came in, right, it is breaking that myth, and it is now bringing that value, right, in short time boxing cycle called sprint. And it was producing, right, a potentially shippable product outcome or product increment in every 2 weeks of time, right? So that was the kind of benefit, most important benefit that Agile brought in. And also, when we adopted Agile, so it brought in speed, it brought in flexibility, because no more we are in a rigid timeline, but we are also bringing in a lot of flexibility out there in terms of development. And of course, customer centricity is the key. Now, it's not that, okay, we have been given as the kind of a set of requirement. We were always trying to validate that requirement with the market need and the user need, whether this is going to help our customers or not. But with the new, right, evil that or devil that what has come in, that AI, the question which comes to our mind, right, that whether Agile framework will be able to cope up with the unique demand of the Agile AI project. Now, you may ask this question, that is AI something new? Of course not. AI has been there for the last 30 years, 40 years as well. I still remember when I did my electronics BTech, that point in time, we had the AI in my course curriculum. And in fact, I'm sure all of the people like who have been studying, right, for the last 25 years, they also had AI in their curriculum. But why, right, AI was, right, not popular at that point in time? So I would say AI was there, but it was in a cocoon. But now it has, right, come out of the cocoon, and it's flying like a butterfly. Correct. So it was there, but it was there in the background, but now it has come into the forefront. Now, coming back to our original discussion, that whether AI can have an impact, right, on Agile, or Agile, whether Agile can sustain, right, in the AI disrupted marketplace, or AI disrupted environment. But the point here is, the answer is quite optimistic, that yes, we are truly fortunate that we are thinking that yes, Agile has undergone a lot of challenges. Initially, it was disrupted by the continuous faster time to market. DevOps became a savior. Then it had faced a challenge of the enterprise agility. Again, it came out, right, flying colors. So we are expecting that with the continuous adoption, because we know that, like, we have to adapt to the situation whenever it is a disruption, and change is constant, right? So, but we have to adapt to the situation to, right, remain meaningful, remain relevant, right? So Agile is also like that. So we are expecting the Agile to stay relevant even with the AI interrupted, right, marketplace. Now, so let us try to understand now. Now, when Agile, we talk about Agile, it comes up with a, right, Scrum or Kanban or Skill Agile framework or Spotify, whatever be the case. So how can Agile be tailored, whether it is a planned activity, unplanned activity, skilling activity? How can those be tailored in the world of AI or ML workflow, right? That is going to be our point of discussion. Now, the first thing that we need to learn today, right, is a fundamental difference between the AI development versus the traditional software. So we know that like whenever we were doing agile, right, we were focusing mostly on the kind of driven by the requirement. But now when we are talking about agile development in AI landscape, the first thing that comes to our mind is the data. Because now things are not driven by the requirement, things are driven by the data, right? Depending on the different data, depending on their analysis, the requirements are also kind of getting generated. So data centricity is becoming very important. Data quality, volume, and relevances are paramount. So we need to think from that perspective instead of focusing only on the requirement coming from the customer. Now, there is a famous saying from Steve Jobs that you should know your customer from a such close proximity that even before they understand the problem, you are providing them the solution. And you are facing this every time, whether it is an Instagram, whether it is an Apple, whether it is a right Facebook. There are a lot of features which are getting added even before you are reporting them as a problem. How can they do it? Because they are continuously analyzing the data, and from your data, they are generating the requirement without even you are communicating the requirement to them. So that is where the AI comes into picture. Now, so far when we were talking about agile, we were talking about a deterministic outcome, that we know that, okay, if this comes up, this is my acceptance criteria. But whenever we are talking about AI, it is more about experimentation, right? It is more about, right, how continuously AI can be providing us the result. So today, if you're firing a prompt on a particular problem, you will be getting a result. After 15 days, if you fire a same prompt, you will be getting a better result because AI is also continuously learning. So it is learning capability. Its probabilistic outcome is changing continuously. So AI models often produce the probabilistic or approximate result because it is continuously improving. Now forget about 15 days. If you go to right ChatGPT, if you go to Copilot, if you go to Gemini, in some cases you might be seeing a little bit of different results in all the cases because their LLMs have been taught with some or other algorithm and they are able to fetch the data properly. So that is one of the very key aspect, right? How we things should be changing. The next point is the experimentation. So agile, whenever we are doing it, again, as I said, we are driven by the requirement, we are driven by the design. But here it is not like that. We are continuously doing the experiment. And from that experimentation results, we are learning because we have seen that whenever you are giving a prompt, right, it is giving us a result. And after that, what is given there, whether you like the prompt or you dislike the prompt, I mean, the result. So if you, right, give a thumbs up, it understands, okay, this is a good data for me. If you give a thumbs down, that understands, okay, this is not not the result people are kind of looking for. And behind the scene, it is involving the different type of algorithm, different type of model architecture, hyperparameter tuning, and the feature engineering. Now here, the feature is driven by the data, driven by the experiment. So this is another very interesting thing which is coming into picture. Now, when we talk about conventional agile way of working, right, there are certain right metrics which we talk about, like velocity, like predictability, right, that plan versus actual, etc., etc. But when you do the same thing in an agile enabled environment, metrics are also kind of changing. Now, when we talk about done, it is should be production ready, right? It can be deployed to production. But when we do the same thing in the AI enabled environment, it is not exactly deployable. It is that, yes, it has achieved the threshold limit, that what was my expectation, it has reached to that level. But that does not mean this is the final thing. There is nothing called final here. Now, you can always improve. Your response can always improve because it's a continuous process of learning. It's a cognitive thing. You feed more data, the result can be more refined. So this is how, right, it is continuously, right, evolving. Now, another thing is, right, again, as I just said, right, example of thumbs up and the thumbs down, right, user feedback for the AI often leads to changes in the data need, model, or objective. So depending on your response, depending on whether you like it or not like it, depending on the question you are asking, AI is learning and going ahead. Let me give an example here. So I'm sure like you all know about that. I forgot exactly the year. I think it's 1989 or something, 1992, when Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. That was the first tangible outcome of the AI. Now, millions and millions of moves, right, were given or taught to the Deep Blue. Then only it became comparable to, because Kasparov was a reigning champion at that point in time, and beating him was not an easy task. So IBM did a fantastic job by feeding a lot of data. Think about the technological advancement at that point in time, right? Almost 40 years back. So this is how the requirements are evolving. This is how so the Deep Blue started learning, because you never know. Because if that move was not known to Deep Blue, it will not be able to act. So kind of like it was a great comparison between the human brain and the machine intelligence. Now, the next area that we need to focus on is the data-centric iteration cycle. Now, so far, again, as I said, we have been driven with the user story. We have been driven with the requirement, etc., etc. But now things are changing, because when we talk about agile in AI-enabled area, then it's all about data. So data sourcing and the collection. So your short time boxing cycle or sprint needs to explicitly incorporate the data-related activity. So your sprint should not be involving any further tasks like analysis, design, development, etc. Rather, you should see now, right, more new tasks coming up. Kind of new tasks coming up, like identifying, accessing, or collecting the new data set. Because the more data you get, that you can develop a better model. Now, data cleaning and the pre-processing, that is also important. Now, there had been data, and that is where the data analysis, data mining, engineering, right, all those things are coming up. So which is a good data? You should be able to clearly defining that what is the good data and what is the right data set. Because in the social media, think about it. Whenever you are posting something, there are, for the celebrities, there are millions and millions of the post. And maybe 90% of the data are invalid data. But when those 10% data are coming as a valid data, right, those are coming as a kind of requirement for you. So this is often the most time consuming part of the AI project, because you have to filter out the data. So your sprint should allocate a significant effort to tasks like missing value, outlier, normalization, or standardization, because you cannot deal with all the data. Before that, a lot of filtering is required. Then we talk about feature engineering. Now, this is creative process of transforming new data into feature. As I said earlier, earlier what we used to do, we used to give them the feature which is tested by some test data or production data, whatever. But now things are changing. So we are saying this is now the features are created depending on the data. Okay, people are liking this much people are liking this particular thing, this particular app or something like that. So this needs a little bit of more revision. So these features are more lucrative for them. So you should take a decision that whether this feature will stay in the next version or not, depending on the data analysis. Now think about it. I'll just try to give a simple example. In a smartphone, there are a lot of features available. Now the question is, how many of you are knowing even 30% of the feature? We are always looking for upgrade, high, I would say, featured models. But unfortunately, how many of us are actually exploring all the features? Still, we are sticking to those basic or maybe some of the advanced features. Now, recently I went abroad and I had we had a good family outing out there. And one fine day, and somehow from the office, I got a kind of Apple iPhone because of the position or something. So we took some photo out there. So at the end, generally I don't use that much because it's an official phone. But at the end of the day, when we were relaxing, all of a sudden my wife said, Shubho, we have got a video coming out of that particular day, the best pictures. And I was surprised. So earlier we had to do it all on our own. We have to filter out out of 200 pictures, we need to filter what are the best picture. We need to do a lot of resolution activities, etc. And then coming up with a video. But now iPhone is doing it. iPhone is giving it handy to me. So what are the features which is coming out there that is becoming very, very interesting, right? What people will like. Next is data labeling and annotation. Now we know that there can be different type of learning in AI. Supervised learning, unsupervised learning, semi-supervised learning, etc., etc. Now when we talk about the supervised learning, the human annotation is crucial. And this can be integrated into sprint or managed as a parallel stream with feedback loops to right, refine the leveling guidelines. So this is becoming very, very crucial. Next is the data readiness backlog. I know that like we used to do that, and especially the tester used to do it beforehand. But now it is becoming everyone's right responsibility because that will eventually become a requirement. So collection of the data, cleaning up of the data, annotation of the data, these becomes a right task, or even it can become an acceptance criteria for your story to be accepted. Next is involving cross-functional teams. So typically in an agile team, we are expecting roles like developer, tester, business analyst, etc., etc. But gone are those days. Very soon you will be seeing the new roles coming up as the data scientist, ML engineer, data engineer, etc., etc. Now, product owner or the Scrum Master role may still say because they are not directly into the development, but who are actually going to be the doer, those roles definitions may change very quickly. Now, coming back to the next one, that is integrating data validation into the sprint. Now, regular checkpoint to now, so far, what we have been doing, we were validating our requirement, whether it is meeting the hypothesis or the acceptance criteria with the product owner, not during the iteration review, but within that also. Now, gone are those days. So far, like those days are right coming very nearer to us that when we are going to do the data validation, right, with the product owner or the data scientist every now and then, and always try to define your requirement. And last but not the least, right, in this area, that we need to redefine our definition of ready and the definition of done. We know that the definition of ready gives you the pathway to get started with the sprint. And definition of done, right, it gives you a signal that yes, all our outcomes are kind of accepted. But now definition of ready, done, right, to include the data validation metrics, ensuring the data tasks are complete before the model, right, development process. So things are changing very fast. The last part, handling model training, evaluation, and the experimentation. Now, first and foremost thing, we should be doing the research spike. Now, why we were using spikes? What is a spike? Let me just explain that in a layman language. So spike is an exploration type of enabler. So many times what happens is you are, even if you start doing the work, but you don't know much about the requirement. Let's say it has come very late. You did not get a chance to do refinement. So what we typically do, we try to do a lot of exploration around that requirement to get more insight. Or sometimes it may be that you are surfacing that, okay, there are some technology challenges which I need to figure out. So what we typically do, we try to come up with a right proof of concept to get our hands dirty with the new technology before actually touching the production data or production code. So those are typically right tracked with the spike or the exploration type of enabler. So here also, right, we need to do that, but for exploring the model architecture or the data or the feature engineering strategy without committing to the deliverables prematurely. So that means your definition of ready will be little deferred. Next is define experiment as artifact or the feature. Right? Now, so far the stories were the requirement or the features were the requirement. Now, instead of that, right, we should tell that, okay, now this experiment, right, is becoming my requirement. So this is how we should be, right, going ahead with. Now, experimentation could be with the neural network for sentiment analysis, right, or could be, right, evaluate logistic regression for a new feature B. All those things can come as a new requirement, but not as a story. Then, right, define done, like asynchronous workflow is again one thing, right? It should not be, because you may be getting, right, at any point in time, your flow can be impacted by the asynchronous workflow. And you need to be ready for that. Like typically what we do it in the Scrum also, that even if you are committing for the planned work, but you may be impacted by the unplanned ad hoc work, which is very important for the production. Then define done differently, right? As we just discussed, the done should not be as a right conventional way of checklist like as we had before. Now, it might mean the model trained with specific data set, evaluation of the metrics calculated, performance completed. So all those things should be relevant to your right data validation, data cleaning, etc., etc. Next is incorporate the model right review ceremonies. So now it is not going to be any further a story revision or a story review, but everything is built around the model, the data, etc., etc. So your iteration review is not going to demonstrate the story anymore, but to demonstrate the model. Now, mini experiment as story, like we have already discussed, right? That this should be coming as a new artifact. Then the next point is called continuous integration delivery model, like typically what we call it as a DevOps, CI/CD model. So how, right, just like the code, models and the data pipeline should be version controlled and subjected to automated testing. So your DevOps should also be tuned, right, to go ahead with an agile, I mean, new AI agile adoption, I would say. And last but not the least, dedicated discovery or the right sprint or phases. So in when we started our agile career, that time there was a concept of sprint zero or discovery phase. So in this AI world, it is becoming even more important because here we are going to decide about the experimentation, the algorithm selection, the feasibility study, etc., etc. And what has been there, what has been done in the previous, what has been the success factor, all those informations are required before we get into the sprint. Now, because of its right probabilistic nature than the deterministic nature, sometimes people say that Scrum may not be a suitable model for this. Rather, Kanban will be more useful because Kanban is typically done for the unplanned, ad hoc, just-in-time nature of work, where Scrum is mostly preferred for the planned nature of work. So that is where like we are coming into, right, Kanban board is coming into picture. It may be more relevant. Now, finally, coming to the end of the discussion, right, adopting Agile for AI is not about reinventing the wheel. It's about rethinking how we define the progress, success, and collaboration in a data-driven world. Things are not anymore requirement-driven. Things are now data-driven. How can we embrace the experimental nature of AI and integrating it into the agile ritual? So agile is not going to go away. Again, it needs a little bit of adaptation. It needs a little bit of evolution. Finally, what is the outcome? So the team can deliver smarter, more reliable model faster. So again, having said that, that the future of the agile is not just faster, it is fairer. So thank you so much. Now I would request like any of you has right any question right on this part, right? Feel free to ask, or if you want to share any of your insight, right? Don't hesitate to show.
So probably we can stop recording, then we can discuss.
Yeah.